Let's talk about simple interest. For this topic, we are going to be working out of the GED Kaplan book on page 272. So interest, simple interest, is different from compound interest. And interest we're going to be talking about has a very basic formula, and it's principal times rate times time. So when we talk about interest, we're talking about, like, most of us are familiar when you borrow money, then you have an interest rate. So the amount of money you borrow and the interest rate and how long it takes you to pay it back determines what amount of money you pay back in interest in addition to what you borrow. So that gets added back to your loan, okay? Or let's say you're investing money for retirement or something. So that would be your principal, how much you put in, your interest rate, and how long you leave it in the retirement account, which is why when you leave it in there for a really long time, your interest is a lot over time, and that adds back to however much money you put in. So now let's just make some notes here. I would encourage you to get a note card and let's write some notes on it. You got a lot of topics to keep up with. If you are preparing for the GED math test, you've got this formula on your formula sheet, but you still probably should take some notes. If you are preparing for the HiSET, there is no interest formula on the formula sheet, so you need to be familiar with it. All right, so let's just write under here, the principal is the amount of money you either borrow or invest. The rate is going to be your percentage rate, your percent that you, just the percentage rate at which they're going to apply to your amount of money. And the time, of course, is the amount of time, but it must be in years. And this is really, really important, and they really can snag you up here. So you got to pay attention to that. So our formula is going to look like this. I equals PRT, lowercase. All right, I equals PRT. So interest equals principal times rate times time. Remember that when they're right next to each other, that is multiplication. And we are no longer writing multiplication signs between things because that gets confusing as we get into algebra. Okay, so our steps to solve these. Let's get that down. So our steps are going to be, of course, read the problem and decide the type of problem you are working with. Then you need to write your formula down. And yes, I know that it might be at the top of your page, but every time you get started, you're going to write the plain, regular formula down. Then you're going to substitute the items that you have in your problem into your formula. We call this plug and chug. Because the next step, you are going to chug, compute, solve, and sometimes you've got to use some algebra. It just kind of depends. So you got to be ready. If you're looking for interest, you won't need algebra. You just multiply them all together, right? But you never know what you're going to have and what you're going to be looking for, so you've got to be prepared sometimes to use your algebra. And then, of course, you'll have your answer when you finish. All right, now, something to pay careful attention to. So watch. There's two things. If time is given to you in months, if time is in months, like months of the year, like they do this a lot of times on the cars, they'll say, 0% interest for 80 months or something like that. I don't know. But the length of the loan is 80 months, which is not helping you because you need to have it in years, so you have to convert that to years. So an easy way to remember that is if it's in months, you just put the number over 12. Because that is going to convert it put the months over 12. So example, if they give you 80 months, then that would go in your formula like this, 80 over 12. And you just put it in there because you got a calculator, right? So you can just enter a fraction in the calculator. You know how to do that. And the second thing to watch for is watch for the problems that ask you not for the interest. So they don't want to know how much interest did you earn or how much interest will you have to pay. They ask you how much will you pay back at the end of the loan. And those are basically two-step problems because you're going to have to add your interest back to your principal to determine that. So let's see. So number 2, watch for problems that ask how much you pay back. All right, now let's do a couple of examples together, and then you can start working on page 273 on your own. All right, so examples. I'm going to work the examples from the book. It always helps to watch somebody, or actually, if you would, just work along with me so that you will be ready to work by yourself. It doesn't do a lot of good just to watch, because unless you're writing, you're not going to remember it. I'm sorry to say that, but it's true. Okay, so we're on number 1. Asher borrows $2,500 from his uncle for 3 years at 6%. Simple interest. Notice not compound, simple. How much interest will he pay? Okay, so they're asking us for interest. So the first thing on our step, remember, after we read, is to write the formula. So we're doing example 1, page 272. And so we're going to write the formula. I equals PRT. So it's kind of a fun formula just to say. I equals PRT, 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 PRT. All right, now we're ready to substitute. So it says Asher borrows $2,500. Well, if you borrow it, then it's got to be for principal, right? From his uncle for 3 years. Okay, so that's time at 6%. Oh, one thing I forgot to tell you is we're going to leave this as a percent, or else you got to change it to a decimal. For 3 years, okay? So it's got to be in years, and they asked us to find interest. So notice how I just put my stuff in as I found it. All right, then you basically don't have to use any algebra, do you, here? Because that's just a forwards problem. You just put it in. And let me show you how you do that. If you've forgotten how to put your parentheses in, which you can use the parentheses always, okay? But if you don't want to use the parentheses, you can enter that with the time sign on the calculator. We're just not going to write it with the time sign on our paper because that gets us confused on our algebra. Now watch the percent. So it's 6 second. See that open parentheses button right there? It's got the green percent sign, and the percent sign shows up. Because remember, the percent sign is code for that number over 100. That's what that's code for. That's actually, you're supposed to say in your mind, hey, I know that's really a fraction, but I just shortcutted it and wrote the percent sign. And then we say times 3, and I get 450. Now that's how much the person has earned in interest, but that's not how much that person will pay back. Because remember, you'll pay the $2,500 back plus the $450. But in this problem, they were only asking how much interest will they pay on the loan. Okay, so we got to keep that straight. Now go back to your notes for a second and let's just remember that. We're going to put that on our notes that we need to use the percent sign in the problem or change it to a fraction or a decimal, okay? If you don't want to use the percent, you cannot just put 6. That will not come out right. Your decimal will be off. So you've got to either change it to a fraction or a decimal or use the percent sign and put it in the calculator that way. Now, example number 2. Example number 2 is about Eva. So, Eva invests $3,000 for 9 months. Notice months, it's not in years. She will be paid 8% simple interest on her investment. How much interest will she earn? So they're asking for interest only. Notice she's investing. She's not borrowing now. So if they're asking for interest, we still need to use our formula. Write it down. I equals PRT. Yes, write it down again. This is going to tell you where to put your stuff, right? It says how much interest will she earn. So the I stays in the formula because that's the item we are looking for, and we're going to use the formula to tell me that answer. It says she invests $3,000. Well, that's your principal because that's the amount of money you borrow or invest for 9 months at 8%. So 8% is your percentage rate, and you got to keep that sign with it. But now, remember what we do for months? We said that if they ask you, they give you the time, and it's in months, we should put months over 12. So we're going to make that a fraction. And I know it makes your heart kind of clench up when you see a fraction. So we'll put 9 over 12, but we're not going to worry about it because guess what you've got right here? Handy dandy calculator. Now, notice, this is going what I call forwards because I'm just looking for I, so there's no algebra here. That's just math. That's just plug it in the calculator and we're done. So I'm not going to use the parentheses because it's actually quicker for me not to use it in this case, but if you ever wonder, you can always use the parentheses. Now remember, when you enter 8, you have to hit second open parentheses and you get that percent sign times. And then here's your fraction. N over D, put 9 over 12. So look what you see on the calculator. Then you hit enter and you get 180. So how much money does she earn? That's not how much she earns that has at the end of the time. It's how much she earned during that time. So she made 180 bucks for having her money just sitting there. Okay? Now in the next video, we'll do a few problems from page 273.